Can you guys hear us on Zoom okay? Okay.
Now I can.
Now. Okay. Okay, thank you. We'll get started now.
Grant, the chair, is not here yet, and he's going to be over Zoom when he does come. If the board would like our vice chair to act as chair, Sabrina Ferry, she is here in person, so I guess we'll let the board decide how they'd like to proceed, but I think at this point we have to get started without Grant with you, Sabrina. No. Yeah, you can just call the work session to order. Is that, yeah.
If the green light, yeah.
There we go. Thank you.
So we have two work session items, and they're both from Christina Robertson Gardner. So when you guys are ready, go ahead.
All right. Our PowerPoint is being loaded, but that one's first. I have the wrong one up. Where is it? Oh, HB 2001. Okay, just a second. Great. Once again, my name is Christina Robertson Gardner, and my goal today is to provide an overview of where we are in HB 2001 and the code update, and then start the conversation about middle housing addendums to the design guidelines for new construction. The first couple bits of my PowerPoint is just providing an overview, and it'll end with kind of some topics that the board could choose to address as part of a middle housing addendum. And then we'll go back to that slide and maybe have our conversation on the slide with the topics. I'll also provide an update and kind of next steps of the timeline. So some of these you've seen before, but I just remind everybody, what is HB 2001? It was a House bill passed by the legislature in 2019 as a partial solution, not a full solution, but another tool in the toolbox to address Oregon's housing shortage. The law applies to cities over 10,000 people population within the urban growth boundary. And they provided direction about specific pieces of cities' codes that must be adopted by June 30th, 2022. And so some of my job as staff, I've been working with our consultant team and doing a code audit of our existing code to see what portions of our existing code for middle housing are compliant with HB 2001, what items need to be updated. Some of the items that needed to be updated are very clear direction from the legislature, and other areas have some sideboards where there may be some policy options for the city commission. So in general, the two big pieces of HB 2001 is to allow duplexes on every lot and parcel that allows a single family detached dwelling, and allow triplexes, quadplexes, townhomes, and cottage clusters in areas that allow single family detached dwellings. So that is the large direction we've been given by the state legislature. So middle housing is often categorized as those types of dwelling units that are not a single family home, but are not a multifamily apartment. You'll notice that accessory dwelling units aren't in this, and that is actually, that was not put as part of middle housing, but we do allow accessory dwelling units in the city, and we don't propose any changes to that code. So cluster homes are smaller homes allowed within kind of a courtyard. Duplexes are 2 units. Those could potentially be detached, so 2 separate units on one lot, or attached. Those are some of the policy questions that are coming up. And 3 and 4plex, the same thing. Townhomes are kind of close to 3 and 4plex if you think about it, but townhomes specifically are attached. They can be, they're kind of, they are not identified as kind of being a bottom floor, top floor there, kind of ground floor attached, and since you could draw a line pretty quickly and have each unit be under a piece of property. So we already regulate a lot of this middle housing. We did a big equitable housing project in 2019. Though there are some areas that we currently don't allow as an option that we will need to allow as an option citywide. So you'll see this slide, it identifies areas in red that we currently don't allow. So 3 4-plexes, townhomes, and duplexes on all lots are not currently allowed in our low density residential, R6, R8, and R10, and those will be allowed with some specific criteria moving forward. So what does that mean for historic districts? One of the things we did understand when we were talking to the state, the Department of Land Conservation and Development, is that the legislature was very specific that HB 2001 has to be, for middle housing, has to be allowed citywide, and you cannot remove the types of middle housing specifically from historic districts. So you have to allow middle housing, but you could regulate it the same way you regulate single family. So we have design guidelines for new construction for single family. We can create design guidelines for new construction for middle housing, but we can't categorically remove a type of middle housing from a permitted use of the zone in a historic district. The other piece that we've learned is there are actually areas that we could reduce densities or, in a sense, not allow middle housing uses in our geologic hazard zone. That's goal 7 that looks at natural hazards. And as you know, there's a fair amount of area in Oregon City that's in our geologic hazard overlay district. And there is ability for the city commission, if they want to retain the 2 units per acre, which is currently in our geologic hazard code for all areas of the city, irrespective of middle housing. So even though you might be allowed a 3-plex, if you are in the geologic overlay district in a landslide or buffer area that is subject to the reduced density, you would not be able to build it. So that is something the city commission can continue to do. Also, this does not, the HB 2001 does not retroactively apply to subdivisions that have existing private CC&Rs. So if I am in a subdivision that has active covenants and restrictions from 2005, this bill would not overtake that. Any new subdivision would not allow restrictions for middle housing. So that's, as in McLaughlin and Kenemo don't have CC&Rs because they were platted in the 1850s. Therefore, the third bullet is not relevant. But for other parts in the city, there are sections where middle housing would not be allowed if you have active current CC&Rs that did not allow it. So what are some of the directions we received from the state related to HB 2001? So, and what have we looked at as staff looked at our existing design guidelines? So the existing design guidelines and our municipal code 1740 historic overlay do provide adequate framework to review middle housing today. So if no changes were made to our design guidelines and someone came in with a middle housing project this summer after the code was adopted, the board has the ability to review the application and address it towards the new construction design guidelines and 1740. But we do think there is some missing pieces that would be helpful to provide additional clear direction to both the applicants and the city, the historic review board, and neighbors to understand kind of what type of middle housing the historic review board in this community thinks is going to be the most compatible within a historic district. The addendums and guidelines for middle housing, right now we have additional direction for commercial and multifamily after each, both the Kenema and the McLaughlin historic districts and landmarks. I'm anticipating it would be, in a sense, the addendum. There'll be additional direction for McLaughlin Conservation District middle housing, additional direction for Kenema middle housing, and then for landmarks. These design guidelines can differ from single-family housing design guidelines, but they can't be more restrictive. For example, you can say, you could make a direction related to where front entrances should be, but you can't put a restriction to the point where it would be more, you would be considered more restrictive review criteria for the middle housing. So as we move forward this spring, I'll always be having that look to see, and working with Carrie Richter, our city attorney, is are these design guidelines creating a more restrictive burden, or are they just an apples oranges approach and really have the same level of review criteria? So what is not part of this project? What is not part of, oops, I went the wrong direction. Oops, I lost my, okay. What is not part? So this middle housing is to be seen as a very discrete project. It's just addressing how middle housing is implemented in the existing design guidelines for new construction. Any larger revision to the adopted design guidelines should be reviewed as a separate future work item. And then any amendments to the middle housing to be done at that time to match any changes to the single family. So this really goal is, of the adopted historic guidelines we have, what needs to be added as an addendum to provide clear direction for the adopted design guidelines. And comments related to traffic, utilities, and citywide policy direction should be directed to the upcoming adoption hearings, either individually or as a body. So, for example, if the Historic Review Board wants to make a comment related to geologic hazards and density as it relates to the historic district, that may be something the board wants to address as a public comment themselves. But if you have an individual comment about, citywide policy, I can give you direction on how to make those comments through the public hearings process. But if there are items that the Historic Review Board agrees should come as a formal comment from the board, I can take those too as we move into the adoption process. So some topics that the board could consider in addendum for middle housing design guidelines. So one key thing is all the architecture and siting standards will be addressed through the kind of the master section of each district. So landmarks, McLaughlin, or Kenema. So if, let's say I wanted to do a middle housing in McLaughlin, I wanted to do a threeplex in McLaughlin, I would go to the McLaughlin section, still read which architectural style makes sense, what are the general siting standards. Those would be the same for middle housing and single family. And then I might go to this other addendum page that gives a little bit more direction for triplexes. So what are these categories of that additional direction the board may want to see? One could be setbacks and size, the volume or footprint. When, if ever, should middle housing be allowed to be larger than a single family house? Are detached units encouraged over attached, or is there ever a time where it's attached would be encouraged? Should each unit be conceived as a separate volume if they're attached? Or if not, or should they always be designed to look like a single family house? So that might be some direction to think about. Entrances, how many should face the street? Does it matter? For the townhome section, clear direction on where garages are sited or accessed. So maybe in this situation, indicating that garages should be accessed to the side or rear of a unit, the number of units allowed to be attached, stairs and access. I know you go into the design guidelines, it talks about, excessive use of stair entrances, when you have 10, 15 steps up may not be appropriate. That'll be the same for middle housing, but providing clear direction of stairs and access areas for these middle housing. Cluster housing, the max footprint of all units, ratio to single family. So those are just some general ideas. I'll always kind of go back and say, if what we say for single family is the same for middle housing, we don't need to add it to the addendum. So it's really, what are the things that are different than what you would say in the design guidelines for the district you're looking at. So I want to provide a little additional direction on the geologic hazard overlay. Oops, there we go. There we go. So see here, this is the geologic hazard overlay for Kenema. There's lots of colors, but I'll kind of explain them to you. The dark brown and the orange and kind of the dashed line are historic landslides, scarps, and slumping. So those are all areas that are subject to the geologic hazards overlay district and could have the reduced density of 2 units per acre. So these areas may have, most likely would not be able to move forward with any middle housing. You'll see 2 type colors of red. There's dark red and then there's pink. The pink is 25 to 35% slope and the dark red is over 35% slope. And the dark red areas have a reduced density. So areas that are light pink, or I guess are the underlying tan, are really the only areas in this area that could support middle housing. Additionally, the historic commercial zone, which I don't have identified, but is really the block on either side of McLaughlin Boulevard. So really is that flat area where you see areas that are not in the geologic hazard do not allow currently middle housing. And talking with the Department of Land Conservation and Development, because historic commercial is generally a commercial identified district, and even though it does allow single family, its purpose is a commercial district, we don't necessarily need to adopt middle housing there. So by the time you're done, there's very little lots that could support middle housing in Kenema. So one thing to think about as we go through, maybe there might not need to be Kenema design guidelines for middle housing, or maybe there is just a slight addendum. But right now, I see there's looking over the geologic hazards and the ability to potentially reduce the density, and if the city commission supports it, there may not be a lot of opportunities for middle housing in Kenema. That being said, the city commission could move the other direction and say, we have a maximum disturbance area that you could build a cube of a house. And if you want to do 1 single family unit in that cube, or you want to do 2 studio apartments in that cube, it's still the size of the cube. But we don't necessarily need to reduce the amount of dwelling units. So that's one approach the city commission can take. We went out to the community this fall and winter and had survey questions about reduced density and geologic hazards, and we had a mixed result. So we'll provide those in an update to the city commission in March, but we didn't get clear community direction, though there was definitely strong support for reducing the density and support for potentially exploring others. So it was kind of a mixed bag. But that's one thing that the Historic Review Board could choose to make a comment to the city commission on. I'm going to show you, McLaughlin is next. You'll see there is less there's less areas of the geologic hazard overlay district in McLaughlin. Areas, once again, in dark red are over 35%. The geologic hazard overlay is generally kind of by the high school, which is for the most part out of the district boundaries. There's a lower area south by Waterboard Park, which is subject, but a much larger portion of the McLaughlin Conservation District is not impacted by the geologic hazard overlay district. And so therefore there's more likely to get middle housing proposals inside the McLaughlin Conservation District than Kenema. So what are the next steps? And then after this, I'll go back to the slide that had the topics. There's kind of a 2-track process that's happening. To the right, you'll see the HB 2001 code amendments. We're looking at trying to separate out into two packages, two buckets. What needs to be adopted by June 30th, 2022, and kind of what areas could or should be adopted, but maybe the City Commission or the Planning Commission may want to have a little bit extra time to chew on kind of the pros and cons or the policy implications. And so we start code hearings on March 28th after a work session on the 14th, and then looking at City Commission hearings into April and May, with the first bucket adopted by June 30th. If the Planning Commission, City Commission can give clear direction or feel they can give clear direction on all the proposed code amendments, we'll adopt it once. If they pull aside sections that feel that they need some more time to review, we'll have that in a second batch later this year. But what does that mean to the Historic Review Board for the design guidelines? Where we are today, it's February. Based on your comments and direction, I'll return back at a future hearing with draft approaches. And at some point, you'll be ready for this spring, you'll be ready for a draft-ready adoption document. The Historic Review Board approves design guidelines for new construction, but it's been our policy to ensure that there's clear agreement between the Historic Review Board and the City Commission. So we usually bring it up to the City Commission for a resolution of support, and then we bring it back to the Historic Review Board for the final adoption. So we got to have like discussion ready, adoption to the City Commission, resolution of support, and then back to the Historic Review Board for full adoption. And if we can get that done by June 30th, that's great. If we're not quite there, okay, because we have the existing tools if middle housing comes in this summer. And so I'm going to go back to the topics, and I'm ready. How's our timing? Okay. We have about 10 minutes. If there's any specific topic of category you think I'm missing, I'll write that down. Or if there's any of these topics or guidelines you're really most concerned or want the board to, in the future, to spend kind of your deep thoughts on, it'd be good to know like what topics are you most concerned about. And we'll go back to that slide. Oops, sorry, I missed it. There we go. So I'm open for any discussion by the board, both here and online.
Paul?
I'm trying to understand.
Can you speak into the mic? Sorry.
Good. I'm trying to understand middle housing, the parameter, is it around dollars and cents where we're trying to create a middle bracket that somebody can afford? Or is it size? And we're trying, I would have to believe what we're trying to do is create a type of housing that middle income people can afford.
That's a great question. I have two answers for you. And this is kind of something we've been talking about citywide. I think the elected officials in Salem saw that we really over time segregated into single family home districts and multifamily districts. And we don't zone a lot for middle family. And they want middle family housing to be processed in the same way as single family. So I should be able to go outside of a historic district. I should be able to fill out a packet and go to the building division and build without having like a land use notice or a site plan and design review. So it's simplifying the process, making the process the same review time and process as a single family house. So reducing the complexities. And by having potentially more units on one lot, being able to share maybe the burdens of cost that may be, if it was one new house, you still have some fixed costs for infrastructure utilities that can be shared by more than one unit. So you're bringing that down. So affordability is a piece, and the land use to allow middle housing is a tool and a piece of the puzzle. And as a land use planner, I'm always the first one to acknowledge that just because you zone for it doesn't mean it'll get built. That's a piece. So we're removing the barrier to allowing some of these units citywide. But as a city, if we want these units to be built, we may have to look at other tools or understand where the other burdens are that may be more financial and less land use, if that makes sense.
Could we?
Did I solve that? Did I answer that question for you, Paul?
Could we reduce lot size so that as to right now we have a 500 or we're in R6 area in Kanema, but could we take it down to a 2.5
Sure. And
lot size?
some of that will come out of another piece that I did not put in here, which is called House Bill or Senate Bill 458, which we call middle housing land division. So for example, citywide, not just in a historic district, let's say I want to do a threeplex. If I build a threeplex and my threeplexes, I could easily draw a line, like they're like almost like a row house, or I could draw a line and create deed simple lots. So I build the threeplex that it may be attached or detached based on the direction the city commission wants to go. And with that process of building the middle housing, I could create deed simple lots to sell. So that is one answer that Salem also gave as part of this House bill, which is to allow the division of middle housing so people can buy those lots with conventional loans. And so that's a piece of the puzzle as well, so instead of reducing the lot size, it may be you could build the middle housing and then be able to sell each of those units individually for deed simple lots with the land underneath it, not like a condo where you buy into the condo right, but there's only one big tax lot.
Could we also put a parameter, a bracket around dollars and cents of so let's say assessed value?
So those are, yeah, so
so that if where we also reduce costs of permitting or through the whole permitting process.
Sure.
Right now, the cost before someone starts to build a house, after they've gone through all of the permitting and process of HRB, might end up being $125,000.
Right. So Paul, I encourage you to go to the March 8th City Commission work session. One of the requirements of House Bill 2001 is for cities to start the discussion about other financial tools outside of land use to reduce barriers for middle housing. And we'll have a presentation by one of our consultants from Echo Northwest that will talk about 3 of them and look for direction from our city commission if that's something that they want to pursue kind of as a separate project to this land use. This is just a land use project for changing the code. But I would encourage you to attend the March 8th or watch on YouTube, on our city's YouTube channel, to watch the presentation about other non-land use tools to incentivize or reduce the barriers to middle housing.
That's going to be at
Here, March 8th.
Here?
Mm-hmm.
March 8th, okay.
So we want to run out of time. We also will be talking about OC 2040, our comprehensive plan update. But are there any other comments to the design guideline topics? And Lisa, would you mind bringing that back up? I just want to make sure these are the ones that came up to me, but I want to make sure I'm not missing something, or I want to hear from the board if there are topic ideas you think that the board wants to concentrate on in the addendum that are different than so if it's the same as single family, we won't add to the addendum because you'll be still meeting that when you are looking at the kind of the master part of the district. I don't know if there's anybody from from Zoom, any of our 2 other board members, Board Stobie. or Board Belknap if they have any comments.
I have a question.
Sure.
So we were talking about in the geologic hazard overlay, how we might want to limit, what units could be built, particularly in Kanema, not saying that we should, but, it does say in here that cottage clusters are something that, we're talking about, and we do have a cottage cluster in Kanema. So how would that fit into that?
Well, that's a pre-existing approval. So if,
Right, but how somebody could look at that and say, well, this is in the geologic hazard zone, but now all of a sudden
right, so if that happened and a new new cluster wanted to come in, then they would meet today's code, which says you are in any area of the geologic hazards that reduces the density to 2 dwelling units per acre. And if you have less than an acre, you're allowed 1 unit. That's what today's code says. That would prevail. So if you don't want any change, no change needs to happen to our code, because right now our code says middle housing, says areas of reduced density are 2 units per acre with a minimum of 1 dwelling unit if you have less than an acre. So a cottage housing cluster would not be able to occur in those regulated areas today.
Okay.
Anybody else before we move on to OC 2040? And this is a legislative process. There's no ex parte contact. There's no, conflict. I mean, there is conflict of interest, but you can call me, you can talk to me, you can talk to each other. You can talk to each other outside of the meetings. We don't have to follow what you do with a quasi-judicial process. So feel free to ask me questions or talk to your neighbors or talk to your friends about what they think. This is a legislative process. So feel free to have those conversations outside the board if that's something that would help you and provide additional direction.
One final one. Can we create tiny houses in where we have a footprint of the main floor in the under 200 square feet and do like 1.5 story type, like a vernacular, where I have a bedroom upstairs, but it is in a tiny house format. So as that we are what we're trying to do is just literally create something that's as big as a mobile home.
Right. So that would be a cottage cluster, and it would be allowed anywhere cottage clusters are allowed. And we do have code criteria for cottage clusters. And that would be, it's permanent dwelling units. So I think that there was a conversation, board member Edgar was talking about related to temporary housing that would be different. So cottage clusters are a permanent regulated dwelling unit development project. All right. Okay, feel free to email me, provide me direction. I'll return at a future meeting, either the March or April meeting with some proposals for the 3 districts. And we'll move from there. Okay.
Thanks, Kristen.
So the next one is our OC 2040 update. So I'm going to get that PowerPoint going. Give us a second. All right. So we are back. We've talked to you before about OC 2040, but this is a very specific pause in our process, and we want to be able to elicit feedback both from you individually and from the Historic Review Board. I'm going to provide a little bit of update of how we got to where we are today, talk about the proposed goals and policies. I'll zero in on the goals and policies that are related to the Historic Review Board. We'll talk about the forum, which is open right now till March 14th, where you can provide your own individual comment. And then if the board wants to provide a future letter at a future meeting, I'll kind of provide you some direction on how you can work with Kelly to submit a letter if there's anything that the board together wants to let the City Commission know is of value to them. So what is OC 2040? OC 2040 is updating our existing comprehensive plan. We adopted it last time in 2004. And comprehensive plans are created to reflect the community's vision and guide decision-making about future growth and development. And the plan is implemented through its goals and policies, which we're talking about tonight. And these goals and policies influence development code, ordinance, projects, and city commission future work plans. So what is a comprehensive plan? The comprehensive plan is tied to land use. We are required by the state of Oregon to have a comprehensive plan. Goals and policies are, as I said, a key role in that formal comprehensive plan that is approved by the state of Oregon. They not only highlight residents' desires, but provide a documented roadmap to guide the decision-making of current and future city commissions. The comprehensive plan is implemented through our city plans, such as Parks Master Plan, Transportation System Plan, concept plans for areas within the urban growth boundary, and our zoning code. So we look to the comprehensive plan as our kind of parent document for all of the decisions and documents we create for the city of Oregon City. So comprehensive plans kind of start with a vision, and through the first year of the comprehensive planning process, we had a really extensive outreach, advisory team, community outreach to really understand the community's vision. There was 4 categories created for that vision, and that vision document was adopted this summer by our city commission. I don't have it on here, but it's kind of 4 really strong paragraphs that show an aspiration of what we want to be as a city. So with our aspirational vision document adopted, we looked at the goals and policies that should be associated with that. Goals are broad statements of purpose that define what the community wants to achieve, and policies are clear statements guiding a specific course of action for decision makers to achieve a desired goal. And then there are more specific action items which are more implementation based and really exist as a side document as work plans that implement goals and policies. So in 2004, when the City Commission adopted the comprehensive plan, we adopted a lot of goals and policies, and a lot of policies that were actually action items. Oh, I'm here. Sorry, I wasn't on. I apologize. We adopted a lot of action items that we said were policies, and some of them were very time specific, so they were dated. Either they were adopted and not removed as a work item, or they were just not as, they didn't really have a 20-year vision to them. They were very specific in the year they were adopted. And so I think we had like 170 something goals and policies. We had a lot. And so one of our aims this time around is to really concentrate the goals and policies to items that can last 20 years, that have clear direction, and then as we move forward, to identify the action plans, implementation items that will actually implement those goals and policies. And then with the action items, you don't have to amend your comprehensive plan every time you meet something. You're just showing how you are actually implementing those goals and policies through your action items. The other key piece, which I thought was really interesting, is in 2004, when the comprehensive plan was updated, the last time from the 1980 version, so this is the 3rd version of a comprehensive plan we've had, we went out, and actually I was here, we went out to all of our subject matter experts, so the Parks and Rec Advisory Team, the Historic Review Board, and with staff, rewrote draft chapters of the comprehensive plan. And then we went out to the public and said, hey, what do you think about the thing we wrote? So what we did this round is we kind of flipped the script. We went out to the community and said, what do you want to see in your community? What are your aspirations? What are your vision? What is your vision? And then from that, we're distilling our goals and policies from that. So we're trying not to lead the public in the answers. So some of the goals and policies may look too generalized to you, but I think we wanted to flip that script and see what the public wanted, and then now go to our subject matter experts, you and our staff, and see what is missing or what's the extra detail we may need but knowing we still don't want to get into that gray area, which is the action items. So, but maybe the goals and policies may need some additional or more of a fine tuning. So that's where we're at today. We've heard from our community, and now we're asking our subject matter experts to provide kind of additional direction. So tonight, we're going to obtain initial feedback on the draft goals and statements and policy ideas. And then once again, if the board wants to provide formal feedback, you can do that through a formal letter, though I will write down any comments you have tonight. But also, if you want to have a formal letter, Kelly can work with you as we move forward this spring. And then I'm also really encouraging every single board member and anybody you talk to, attend or go to the virtual comprehensive plan forum, and you can just go to the city's comp plan website, which is oc2040.com, and you can take the survey, which is a forum. So you can take a look at the goals and policies on your own time, and you can respond individually about items you think, not just historic preservation, but if there are other items you want to address individually. The forum is a great clearinghouse for that information. So, developing draft goals and policy ideas. We went through, hold a second. So where are we today? I don't have that slide, sorry. Where are we? We are in the yellow, so we're kind of wrapping up the public outreach part. We're doing the synthesizing and feedback, and then as we get into later 2022, we'll look into adoption. So we're towards the end of the process. We had, up until here, we had 4 comprehensive plan summits this fall based on topic ideas. We had some drop-in meetings with our community development director. We had community online surveys, and we've had 11 project advisory team meetings made up of a very broad cross-section of Oregon City residents and people who are subject matter experts outside the city. So there are 4 topics and 4 themes that came out of the community vision: healthy and welcome community, diverse economy, connected infrastructure, and protected environment. The healthy and welcoming community, you'll see policy 2, protect and acknowledge historic and cultural resources. I'll come back to this section in a future slide, but each theme has a number of policies, a number of goals, and then policies that support those goals. These are concepts. If you want to actually read each policy, those are attached to your document, on your agenda, and they're available at the forum. The next topic is diverse economy, so dynamic, ecologically sound and socially equitable economy, housing options for all residents, maintain an urban growth boundary, and sustainable site design and construction practices. The next is connected infrastructure, safe and equitable multimodal transportation system, maintain and improve public facilities and infrastructure, ensure health and safety through comprehensive service provisions, and resiliency and energy conservation. And the last one is protected environment, a system of trails, parks, and recreational amenities, function, health, and diversity of natural resources and ecosystems, and mitigate natural hazard risk and manage rapid response recovery. So these are the policies related to goal 2 of healthy and welcoming communities. Promote the Willamette and Clackamas Rivers as a community benefit for cultural connection and understanding. Acknowledge the history of tribal presence in Oregon City and seek opportunities to educate community members and elevate understanding. C, facilitate historic preservation programs for retention of quality, locally designated historic districts and sites. Identify and protect important cultural resources and historic amenities through programs, interpretive signage, and other means to increase awareness and generate appreciation. And E, provide activities and programs for residents and visitors that weave together education, recreation, historic, and cultural resources. So these are our existing proposed policies related to goal 2, which is acknowledge and protect and enhance and commemorate Oregon City's historic and cultural resources. I have 2 more slides and we'll come back to this slide. Once again, oops. The Comprehensive Plan Forum, I encourage all of you to go visit in the next couple of weeks, the Comprehensive Plan Forum. It's open till March 14th. And you can provide your individual comments to any of the policies and the goals that have been identified and are available for review in the forum. And here's a little sneak peek of what the comprehensive plan document looks like. So you just see the goals and policies, but there'll be background information for all the chapters. And this is kind of shows the table of contents, and to the right kind of shows what comprehensive plan documents of other communities. But we'll be looking at kind of how to use the document, the vision statement process. We'll go into the goals and policies and the background related to each of them, and then look at appendix documents. So the goals and policies you see are going to be a piece of the larger comprehensive plan, but they're really the most important piece. And the future city commissioners are going to be having to, make policy direction and decisions based on these adopted goals and policies. So we do want to make sure we have clear direction from our boards and commissions on areas that you're passionate about. So next steps, let's see, visit the forum. I myself and other staff will be making presentations to all of our boards and commissions in January through March. And then there will be an update to the Planning Commission, City Commission in March. And what date is that right now?
So we're going back to Planning Commission on February 28th, and then we go to City Commission on March 8th, and then they have a joint meeting April 12th.
Okay. Thanks, Aquila. So I'm heading back to the slide that looks at the historic preservation goals and policies, and I was going to do a time check with Lisa and Kelly. Okay, let's see what we can get done in the next 10 minutes. So I'm here to listen to any comments anybody here and online have about a specific wording of a goal or policy or something you think is missing for this section. And I'm here to take notes. And anything I hear tonight, I will forward on to our consultant team. They'll receive also anything coming out of the forum, as well as anything the board wants to send formally. Is there a policy that really how about we'll go the other way? Is there a policy that really resonates with you or resonates with the Historic Review Board?
In the policies here of C, facilitate historic preservation programs for the retention of quality, locally designated historic districts and sites. We hopefully within this are taking steps to ensure that we reinforce through our actions what is significant in making a historic district or a house a historic house, so that what we do does not dilute or take down the importance of a statement of significance of historic properties.
May I ask for just a bit of clarification, Mr. Eggers? So are you saying that as we move forward with this comprehensive plan update, we need to take care that the existing policies and guidelines and regulations around historic preservation are not diluted? Is that where you're going? Is that when we move forward with changes, we need to make sure we don't dilute anything we have now?
Any change that we make should complement or reinforce the importance.
Okay.
So that being kind of the benchmark, saying if it doesn't, we need to review it.
I like the way, I like that, the way you put it as the benchmark question, does this policy protect and not further dilute the historic significance
Yes.
of the thing that the policy is talking about?
Yes.
Other comments?
Well, I'm really happy to see that there's a lot of talk about cultural resources and protecting cultural resources, and sort of maybe bringing more to the forefront some of those issues. I think that's a really important thing to do moving forward. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of preservation is coming to terms that it was created in the 60s and even the 20s, looking at the preservation of structures. Mm-hmm. And that is a piece of cultural resource protection. And, you know, preservation itself is marching towards a greater understanding. And how does that greater understanding get embedded into things like goals and policies and code? Mm-hmm.
One last thing. We need to take steps to improve infrastructural connections, the ability of, maybe this is an area where the city, with help or grants, comes up with a way to make the cost to create new housing opportunities. And I think like out South End Road, where that has limited infrastructure, where it would be difficult for us to create infill in some of those areas with the costs that it would take to create, to make them buildable. And so, as we try to move out, we've got to have some look at how we can reduce the cost of some of the critical elements that would prevent development.
Mm-hmm. So I put, I've added the diverse economy slide, and so we do have talks about housing options for all residents. So I would encourage you to look at the sub-policies in that section when you visit the forum. And that's a great place to talk about incentives the city could look at, or looking at, do we have another, policy that talks about where the city should concentrate looking at incentives. And maybe just, we just finished a housing needs analysis, and that has told us some pieces that we're missing, but the conversation of carrots beyond land use definitely might have a role in the policies of not necessarily give the answer, but it might be something the city commission wants to take on as a generalized policy. I'm going to go back. Anything else?
Christina?
Yeah.
I guess I'm looking at letter C.
Okay.
The wording facility. So letter C is the one to me that really speaks to kind of the regulatory nature of our preservation program. Mm-hmm. And facilitate historic preservation programs. I guess when I think about that, I don't really know what that means, or if it's different from what we're doing today. Like, mm-hmm. is that calling for any change in how we operate, or just continuation of what we're doing, right? I think that's where I'm a little lost. Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I don't know. So exactly. Well, this is really this conversation. If, as our consultant team and staff, we are hearing comments from everybody, and they're trying to, massage and integrate into a policy that says a lot of things. Maybe that's the wrong word to use, or maybe there's a better word, or maybe there's a different angle that can encapsulate this question of, yes, we need to create and facilitate our preservation program to ensure we don't
erode our historic significance and we don't, and even potentially, what I'm hearing is, how is this different than what we have today in
Right.
2004? So,
Yeah. No, I was just saying that to kind of maybe lead to maybe a future discussion to see what the board thinks about that sentence, you know. We didn't have a lot of time to discuss it today. I think one thing the board could do is like write a recommendation or a suggestions from the board to the commission, to the city commission about these. Or you could choose to just kind of leave your comments as individuals through the website. So if it's something that you want to do as a group, then we could certainly put this on our March agenda to come back and maybe discuss more, so that you could, you know, kind of give some comments as a board if you'd like to do that.
I would be open to discussing this further in March with the other board members if others would like to do so.
I'd be on board with that.
Agreed.
All right, sounds like, sorry. go
I
ahead.
said agreed.
Okay, so it sounds like this could be a work session item in March to have a further conversation about the wording of these goals and policies.
Yes.
yeah, and so I really recommend between now and March, I would really recommend every board member visit the forum because it will really help you get to a place where at the March meeting, like you kind of thought through what you wanted. And so you've kind of answered for you, and that might be able to distill the things you want to talk about at the March meeting. So all you have to do is go to oc2040.com and click on the link for the forum. But it closes on March 14th. So it'll be right before the next meeting, about a week and change. Well, thank you everybody for having me tonight. I think my goal is to come back in March for HB 2001 and design guidelines. And then I'll kind of be working with Kelly. She'll kind of take the lead a little bit on the specific board response to the goals and policies. So, thank you all.
Thank you.
So I think that the media room needs to have a break between the work session meeting and the regular meeting, so we can adjourn the work session and then come back in a few minutes.
Would it be possible for Grant to chair tonight, and then I will take notes, because I think I would probably just botch it. Or just stumble through the whole order of everything. Is that?
Grant, did you hear that?
Yeah, that's fine with me, whatever is easier for all of you in the room.
Okay, I'll take notes. Apologies.
Grant, do you need me to send you a script, or you have that handy?
Nope, I've got it.
Okay, thanks. I think we can adjourn.
Since we're resetting the media room, do we need to sign out and sign back in, or can we just stay logged in on